Silence changes people in ways most never notice, especially empaths. At first they try harder, they become more patient, more understanding, more emotionally available. They listen to problems nobody else wants to hear. They carry emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. But little by little, something inside them starts shutting down. Not because they stop caring, and not because they suddenly hate people. The real reason is much darker than most realize. Many empaths slowly reach a point where solitude feels safer than connection. Peace starts feeling better than conversations. Distance starts feeling healthier than emotional closeness. And the frightening part is that most people never even notice when this transformation begins. Because empaths rarely explode. They disappear quietly. They answer less. They open up less. They stop explaining how they feel. And eventually they begin building an emotional world where very few people are allowed to enter. Psychology experts have spent years studying emotional overstimulation and sensitivity, and one lesser-known fact is that highly empathetic people often experience emotional exhaustion much more intensely than others. Their nervous system reacts deeply to tension, dishonesty, manipulation, and even emotional moods in a room. While most people recover quickly from emotional pressure, empaths tend to absorb it and carry it for much longer. Over time, this creates a silent kind of fatigue that slowly changes how they interact with people. Many empaths begin craving isolation not because they are antisocial, but because their mind finally starts treating solitude like emotional recovery. And strangely, this emotional withdrawal usually begins when people keep doing the same few things again and again without realizing the damage they cause. In this video, you will learn the 3 behaviors that slowly push empaths toward isolation, emotional distance, and loneliness. But more importantly, you will understand what is secretly happening inside the mind of an empath during this process. One of these behaviors is especially painful because it changes the way empaths trust people forever. This is usually the moment they stop emotionally investing in others the same way again, and many people never realize they caused it until the empath is already gone emotionally. The truth is, empaths do not always isolate because they are weak or overly sensitive, as some people claim. In many cases, they isolate because constant emotional pressure becomes too heavy to carry. They spend years trying to protect relationships while silently destroying their own inner peace. Eventually, their mind starts choosing calm over chaos. And once that shift happens, many empaths become emotionally harder to reach than ever before. So stay until the end of this video, because the 3rd behavior explains why some empaths completely detach even from people they once deeply loved. If you've ever felt emotionally drained around certain people, if you've ever needed distance just to feel mentally calm again, this video may explain more about you than you expect. Welcome to the channel. Here we explore the hidden psychology of human behavior, emotional patterns, and the deeper truths most people overlook. Subscribe now for more deep psychological insights that help you understand people and yourself on a much deeper level. At first, most empaths do not notice what is happening to them. They simply believe they are being kind people, helpful people, supportive people. Friends call them during emotional breakdowns. Family members unload stress onto them after difficult days. Coworkers vent frustrations around them. Even strangers sometimes feel comfortable opening up to them within minutes. Empaths naturally create emotional safety around themselves, and people feel it immediately. There is usually a calmness in the way empaths listen. They do not interrupt quickly. They pay attention to emotional details. They notice pain hidden behind words. And because of this, many people slowly begin using them as emotional shelters without even realizing it. The empath becomes the person everyone runs to when life feels heavy, but almost nobody stops to ask how heavy life feels for the empath. That is where the damage quietly begins. Because empaths are not just hearing emotions, they are absorbing them. Most people leave emotional conversations and move on with their day. Empaths often carry those emotions long after the conversation ends. A single negative interaction can stay in their mind for hours, sometimes days. They replay tones of voice, facial expressions, emotional tension, hidden sadness, hidden anger, and over time their nervous system becomes overloaded from constantly processing emotions that do not even belong to them. Yet most empaths continue helping anyway because caring deeply feels natural to them. In the beginning, they genuinely want to help people heal. They believe emotional support matters. They believe kindness can make pain easier for others. So they keep listening, they keep understanding, they keep comforting people who rarely return the same emotional energy. Slowly, a painful pattern starts forming. People begin associating the empath with emotional relief instead of emotional connection. They contact them when they need support, when they feel lonely, when they need reassurance, when they need someone to absorb their frustration. But once they feel emotionally better, many disappear until the next emotional crisis arrives. And empaths notice this more than people think. They notice who only calls when they need something emotionally. They notice who talks endlessly about their own pain but never asks deeper questions in return. They notice how some people feel emotionally lighter after conversations while the empath feels completely drained afterward. That imbalance slowly changes how empaths experience relationships, because eventually they begin realizing that many interactions are emotionally one-sided. The empath becomes a silent emotional container for everyone else's stress. And the dangerous part is that many empaths normalize this behavior for years. They become so used to carrying emotional weight that they forget what emotionally balanced relationships even feel like. Some empaths even feel guilty for needing space because they are so conditioned to prioritizing other people's emotional needs first. But the body eventually keeps score. Mental exhaustion starts appearing in strange ways. They become tired even after resting. Social interaction starts feeling mentally heavy. Loud personalities become overwhelming. Emotional drama becomes unbearable. Some empaths begin isolating for hours or days just to recover from conversations that other people would consider normal. This confuses many people around them. Friends sometimes assume the empath is becoming distant or antisocial, but the truth is far deeper than that. The empath is emotionally overstimulated. Their nervous system has been overloaded for too long. Many people think empathy is only emotional softness, but deep empathy also comes with heightened awareness. Empaths constantly scan emotional environments without consciously trying to. They notice tension in voices, energy shifts in rooms, forced smiles, hidden resentment, passive aggression, emotional dishonesty. Their brain rarely gets a break from emotional observation. Even peaceful environments can become exhausting if emotional tension exists underneath the surface. This is why many empaths secretly love being alone at night. Silence becomes recovery. Solitude becomes emotional detox. No emotional noise, no hidden tension, no pressure to emotionally hold other people together. Just peace. And eventually peace becomes addictive. Because for the first time in a long time, the empath is no longer carrying everyone else emotionally. Many empaths also struggle with setting boundaries because they naturally understand pain. When someone explains their trauma, disappointment, loneliness, or anxiety, the empath instantly sees the emotional wound underneath the behavior. This makes it difficult for them to say no. Even when they are emotionally exhausted, they continue giving emotional support because they know what emotional suffering feels like. Unfortunately, emotionally unhealthy people quickly become attached to this kind of energy. Some people do not want healing. They want emotional dependency. They want someone who will endlessly absorb their emotions without limits. And empaths often become targets for this dynamic because they are patient listeners. Over time, this creates invisible emotional burnout. The empath starts feeling emotionally responsible for everyone around them. If someone feels upset, the empath feels pressure to help. If someone becomes distant, the empath overthinks what changed. If someone is emotionally unstable, the empath absorbs that instability internally. This constant emotional monitoring slowly destroys inner peace. What makes this even more painful is that empaths rarely express how overwhelmed they truly feel. Many stay quiet because they do not want to burden others the same way others burden them. So while they continue carrying emotional weight for everyone else, they silently carry their own emotional exhaustion alone. And after years of this pattern, something changes. The empath starts craving distance from people they once enjoyed being around. Conversations begin feeling repetitive. Emotionally draining personalities become easier to recognize. Small interactions start feeling mentally exhausting. Even group settings can become overwhelming because empaths are unconsciously processing multiple emotional energies at once. This is usually the beginning of emotional withdrawal. not because the empath stopped loving people, but because their mind finally reached emotional overload. Eventually, solitude feels lighter than carrying everyone else's emotional weight. And once an empath experiences the peace that comes from emotional silence, it becomes very difficult to return to emotionally chaotic environments the same way again. But emotional exhaustion alone usually is not enough to make an empath completely disappear emotionally. There is something even more painful, something that cuts deeper than emotional burnout, because many empaths can tolerate exhaustion for a long time. What truly changes them is feeling emotionally unseen while giving so much emotional understanding to others. One of the loneliest experiences for an empath is realizing how deeply they understand people while rarely feeling understood themselves. This emotional imbalance creates a quiet sadness that many never talk about openly. Empaths often spend years studying other people emotionally. They learn what hurts them, what triggers them, what comforts them. They remember emotional details most people forget. Small changes in tone, mood shifts, hidden sadness behind normal conversations. They become experts at reading emotional patterns because they naturally pay attention to emotional depth. But the painful reality is that many people never return that same emotional attention. Instead, empaths are often misunderstood in ways that slowly isolate them emotionally from the world around them. People call them too sensitive, too emotional, too deep, too intense. Some even treat empathy like weakness. And while these comments may sound small to others, they affect empaths more deeply than most realize, because empaths are not simply reacting emotionally, they are reacting to years of feeling emotionally dismissed. When an empath explains why something hurt them, many people minimize it instead of understanding it. They are told they overthink too much, feel too much, care too much. Slowly, the empath begins learning that emotional honesty is not always welcomed by emotionally unavailable people. So they stop expressing themselves fully. They start hiding parts of their emotional world because experience taught them that most people only understand emotions on the surface level. This creates a very specific kind of loneliness, a loneliness that exists even while surrounded by people. Empaths can spend entire conversations emotionally supporting others while secretly feeling invisible themselves. They become the emotional support system in relationships, families, friendships, and workplaces, yet very few people pause long enough to truly understand what the empath is carrying internally. Many empaths secretly feel exhausted from always being the emotionally aware person in the room. They become tired of explaining emotional depth to people who only understand emotional convenience, because deep empathy changes the way someone experiences life. Empaths do not simply hear words, they feel emotional atmosphere. They notice emotional inconsistency. They sense emotional distance before it is spoken aloud. This heightened emotional awareness can become extremely isolating in relationships where emotional depth is not mutual. Over time, many empaths begin feeling like they exist emotionally alone, even when surrounded by others. And that feeling slowly changes them. They start speaking less about what they truly feel because they realize most people cannot meet them emotionally where they are. Some empaths become quieter with age for this exact reason, not because they lost depth, but because they became tired of explaining depth to people committed to emotional superficiality. Many also develop emotional hyper-independence. They stop expecting emotional support because they learned disappointment too many times. They become self-reliant emotionally because relying on emotionally unavailable people only created more pain. This is why some empaths isolate after emotional conflict instead of chasing reconciliation. They no longer trust emotional vulnerability the same way. They begin protecting their inner world carefully because they know how painful emotional invalidation feels. The painful part is not feeling deeply, it is realizing your depth is inconvenient for emotionally unavailable people. That realization changes the way empaths connect forever. Once they understand that many people only want shallow emotional interaction, they slowly stop seeking deep connection in the same way. This is usually where emotional detachment quietly begins. They stop explaining themselves repeatedly. They stop trying to make people understand emotions they clearly do not care to understand. They stop fighting for emotional closeness with people who only value surface-level comfort. And slowly, isolation starts feeling emotionally safer than disappointment. Some empaths even begin feeling calmer alone than around most people. Solitude no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful, predictable, emotionally safe. There are no hidden emotional games in solitude, no emotional inconsistency, no forced emotional performance. No pressure to minimize emotional depth just to make others comfortable. And this emotional relief becomes difficult to give up once experienced repeatedly. Many empaths also become highly selective about who they emotionally open up to. They may still appear social externally, but internally they keep strong emotional walls around themselves. Because emotional misunderstanding leaves scars that people rarely see. Every time an empath feels emotionally dismissed, a small layer of emotional trust disappears. Eventually, they begin expecting misunderstanding instead of connection. This creates emotional distance even in close relationships. Some empaths stop sharing personal struggles completely because they no longer believe people will truly understand them. Others become emotionally numb after years of invalidation, not because they stopped feeling deeply, but because constantly suppressing emotional depth becomes emotionally exhausting. And the frightening part is that many people never realize this transformation is happening. They simply assume the empath became distant, quiet, reserved, but internally the empath is adapting emotionally to survive disappointment. This emotional adaptation becomes even stronger when kindness itself starts getting exploited, because emotional exhaustion hurts. Emotional misunderstanding hurts even more, but being emotionally used changes an empath permanently. Empaths can survive pain for a long time, they can survive emotional disappointment, they can survive loneliness. But manipulation creates a different kind of damage inside them. It destroys emotional trust, and once emotional trust breaks repeatedly, solitude begins feeling safer than relationships themselves. One of the most painful experiences for an empath is realizing their kindness was never truly valued, only used. Many empaths naturally give second chances because they understand human pain deeply. They try to see the good in people even after being hurt. They forgive behavior others would walk away from immediately. They stay patient during emotional chaos because they know people struggle internally in ways others cannot see. But emotionally unhealthy individuals often take advantage of this compassion. At first, the manipulation is subtle. Small emotional guilt, small emotional dependency. Small moments where the empath's needs slowly become less important than everyone else's needs. Because empaths care deeply, they often tolerate behavior longer than they should. They excuse emotional inconsistency, disrespect, emotional selfishness, broken promises. They keep hoping emotional honesty and patience will eventually create mutual understanding. But over time, they begin noticing a painful truth. Some people are not attracted to the empath because of love. They are attracted to access to emotional comfort, emotional reassurance, emotional healing, emotional stability. The empath becomes valuable because of what they emotionally provide, not because of who they truly are. And once an empath recognizes this pattern clearly, something inside them changes permanently. They start seeing relationships differently. They begin noticing who only appears during emotional convenience, who disappears when emotional support is no longer available, who only values the empath during personal emotional crises. This awareness becomes emotionally devastating because empaths usually enter relationships with genuine emotional intentions. They expect emotional reciprocity, depth, loyalty, care, but repeated emotional exploitation slowly destroys those expectations. Many empaths also notice that people often mistake kindness for weakness. Because empaths avoid unnecessary conflict and try to understand others, some individuals assume the empath will endlessly tolerate mistreatment. Their patience becomes expected instead of appreciated. Their forgiveness becomes exploited instead of respected. Their emotional availability becomes taken for granted. And eventually the empath reaches a psychological breaking point. Not always loudly, sometimes the transformation is completely silent. They simply stop emotionally investing the same way. They stop over-explaining, stop over-giving, stop emotionally chasing people. They begin emotionally withdrawing access to themselves little by little. This is usually the moment people start saying the empath changed. But what truly changed was their awareness. They finally realized that constantly sacrificing emotional peace for emotionally draining people was destroying them internally. Empaths notice more than they say. That is why many stay quiet long before they leave emotionally. They observe patterns silently. They notice manipulation hidden behind affection. They notice emotional dishonesty hidden behind apologies. They notice when their kindness is only appreciated during moments of convenience. And eventually, emotional self-protection becomes stronger than emotional attachment. Once this shift happens, many empaths become far more emotionally guarded. Not because they stopped caring about people, but because experience taught them how dangerous unrestricted emotional access can become. The moment an empath feels emotionally used, something changes permanently. Their trust becomes slower. Their emotional openness becomes selective. Their tolerance for emotional inconsistency becomes lower. Some even begin pulling away from people they deeply love simply because emotional safety no longer exists in the relationship. This confuses many people because empaths rarely explain the full reason behind their emotional withdrawal. They often leave quietly after carrying emotional pain privately for a very long time. And by the time they emotionally detach, the damage has usually been building for years. They may still love people deeply, but they stop giving people full emotional access to them. That is the difference. Love may remain, but emotional openness changes forever. Many empaths become highly protective of their peace after repeated emotional betrayal. They start valuing calm environments more than emotional excitement. They stop romanticizing emotionally draining relationships. They stop trying to save people who refuse to save themselves. And perhaps most painfully, they stop believing emotional sacrifice automatically creates emotional loyalty, because life taught them otherwise. This is why many empaths become quieter with age, not colder, just more careful. They learn that not everyone deserves unrestricted access to their emotional world. They learn that emotional energy is valuable, limited, fragile, and after years of emotional exhaustion, misunderstanding, and manipulation, solitude starts feeling less like loneliness and more like protection. So no, empaths do not always choose solitude because they dislike people. Most of the time, they still love deeply. They still care deeply. But after years of emotional exhaustion, emotional disappointment, and silent emotional pain, many of them begin realizing that not every connection is healthy for their peace. They become tired of carrying emotions that were never theirs to hold, tired of being misunderstood while constantly understanding everyone else, tired of giving loyalty to people who only valued their kindness when it was convenient. And slowly the idea of being alone stops feeling sad, it starts feeling safe. Because sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by enemies. They are caused by constantly giving your energy to people who never truly protected yours. That is why many empaths become quieter over time, not because they lost love in their heart, but because experience taught them that peace is precious, and protecting that peace becomes more important than forcing connections that leave them emotionally empty. The deepest people often spend time alone because peace hurts less than emotional disappointment. And sometimes, living alone feels safer than constantly feeling emotionally drained around the wrong people. If this video felt personal, it's because many empaths silently go through this transformation without ever talking about it openly. So if you saw yourself somewhere in these words, just know that you are not alone. There are many people who understand this feeling more than you think. And if you want more deep psychological insights about empathy, human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the hidden patterns behind people's actions, then subscribe to the channel and become part of this journey with us. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share it with someone who feels everything deeply but hides it behind silence. Sometimes one video can explain emotions that people struggled to put into words for years.